All right, today we're going to do a quick change on the piston ring on the cs2, cs3 models. It's going to be the same for all the cs2, cs3s, el3s, so on and so forth. It's all the basic same compressor. So the first thing you want to do when you take the cylinder head off, if it looks fuzzy, it doesn't look like it doesn't look like grease, it isn't oily, but it looks like fuzz, it's usually this top piston ring has been burned. You can see this one sits a little bit below because it's all chewed up around there. So to get this out, there's an easy way to do this and an easy way to put it back in without having a lot of tools, risking ripping things and doing some weird things I've seen some other people have done and couldn't get it to work. So first thing you're going to do, get this piston pulled all the way up. I'm going to be selling kits with all the tools you're going to need, including rings, grease, everything you're going to need. But what'll be handy is have this little bar. It'll screw right into the top. You're going to yank that piston up. If it's tight, and sometimes they are tight and they're hard to pull up, I've used wrenches on this thing to try to grab the nuts and pull it up. And you could even hook your converter back up and just tap it quick to get the piston to slide up and down, and then it's sometimes a lot easier to pull it up. So you want this at the top. Crack these guys loose. I've already loosened these up. So you want these loose. And once those are loose, push this back down. And once it's all the way back down, inside here, there's going to be this black cap on here. Take the cap off. Inside there is the wrist pin. And what holds that wrist pin in is a little clip. A little clip here. You're going to need yourself some snap ring pliers to get the snap ring out. Once that comes out, again, this handy little tool, it's going to thread into there. And you're going to just pull that out. You're going to wipe it off and clean it up. There's a couple versions of this wrist pin. Pistons have changed, things have changed. This is an older one. I actually like these older ones because you can grease them and grease them really well because grease will come out into here. The newer ones do not have that. They're just going to have the threaded spot here to pull them out. So once we got that out, flip it back over, thread this back in. Piston's going to come right out. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Get yourself a rag, clean it up. It's going to be a mess. So once this is all cleaned up, now notice this is the first time this is coming out. I have not pulled this piston out yet. This is not to be packing a whole bunch of grease in there. I know people do it. They think it's a grease groove. It's not. What it used to be in the really earlier compressors is they had a wiper in there. And they don't put the wipers in anymore because they really weren't necessary. These are self-lubricating plastic, so you don't really need a ton of grease all over this thing. It creates more problems than it does not. What'll happen is you're going to get plugged up all over down in this little area here, which you can see that's kind of plugged up in there a little bit. Try to get some out of there. So you're just going to start compacting grease all over down in the bottom here if you start greasing, filling this up and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So I would recommend not doing that. You're still going to want a little light coat when we put it back together. Now, you can see how low that sits around there. So that is definitely bad. So let's continue to take these out. The reason I like to crack these loose while it's inside the compressor, they're easier to break loose than when you take them out and try to fight with them. And the other thing you're going to notice is some compressed, like I said, this is a little bit older one. It does have the bib seals on there. Some of them have O-rings. If you have a ripped O-ring here, you're going to need to replace that because you will have a compressor that's still going to run, but it's going to run slow. It's not going to run at full speed. So now your top's going to come off. Get that out of there. Now you can kind of see the fuzziness of this thing. It's a little bit fuzzy. That's the old ring that had burned up. Let's wipe that clean. Now if you ever take any of these little reed valves off, make absolutely sure they go back in the exact same position, exact same orientation as you removed them. There's 2 of them there. If they're put on wrong, put on upside down, they're going to look right, but they're not going to be right because they are spring loaded and they have to function. It's a problem that I've had with some people like, I fixed my compressor, I cleaned it all up. Next thing you know, they've removed these, or the other one is these. These also have to go in exactly the way they come out. If they're flipped over or anything else, compressor's not going to build pressure. It has to be exactly as these come out. So, new piston ring. There's a couple different versions of the ring. You're going to see some black ones. You're going to see some that do not have a groove. The one that came out of here, no groove. We're going to put one in that has a groove. You want the groove down, like so. So you're going to put that in there like that. Take your food grade grease. Put some on there. And then set her back in. And the other thing I'll show you. So there's a little spot there for the nut there. Make sure they line up. And then put your screws back in. Now I know there's some people that like to take the piston and roll it around and try to form their piston ring in. I've never had very good luck with that, and it will work for some people. I'm not saying it won't, but it does work. It might speed up your process a little bit if it works. If it doesn't work, you can end up ripping a piston ring, and then you're back to starting all over again. So, just snug them up. We'll tighten them up once we get them in. Then back to your grease here. Put a little more on there. Now the only other spot on these pistons I like to grease, I'll put some in this gap. And the other one's going to have one too. If you see this, it's not they're broke. That's how they have to be, so you can snap them on, snap them off. Alright, now you can always check your bottom, your high pressure here. Make sure it's not chewed up. They're usually not. You can add just a small amount there if you want. Again, we're not going to get crazy with anything because you're just going to create more problems than you're not. So, goes back in like so, just like this. Set her down. Now, here is the way I like to put these back on. Grab your cylinder head after you've cleaned it. Line up your 4 bolts. I've done a lot of compressors this way, and I have yet to have one rip or not seal. It has always worked. So far, knock on wood, right? But in probably 100 or so compressors, this is how I put them on. Just go in your crisscross pattern. Take it nice and slow. Now this will slowly push your piston down, and it's going to form that ring into the cylinder. Like I said, I know some people roll them. I've seen people beat them in with dead blow hammers straight out of the get-go, and I mean, it's 50-50. It might work, it might not. So this will mostly get it flushed out, and once we get it down flush, we're going to take our bottom of our hammer and push it the rest of the way in to get it to seat. Okay, snug down. Now we're just going to take it back off. And like I said, my plan is we're going to have a bunch of the rebuild kits. They're going to come with all the tools you need, including that little bar there, the grease, the red grease, the food grade grease that you need for the cylinder. Basically everything you're going to need to maintain this compressor, including the gold wrench, which is going to be used to get the check valve off the bottom. So you'll be able to pretty much do anything you want as far as maintenance goes. So let's take the hammer and push her home. Now, once you got that all the way down, grab your grease, a little bit on the finger. We don't need to get crazy with it. Again, more is not better for these compressors. And that is that. So, the one thing that can be a pain in the butt to put back together is the wrist pin. When you're putting that in, you got to get the connecting rod lined up right. It's really hard to see, but when you're working on one of these, you'll see it. You'll see how that's going to go and how it needs to be. Now, if you have one of these earlier ones, you can squirt it right through there and you'll see it comes out. It's pretty slick. And then just get some of your red grease on there. I mean, none of this stuff is anything fancy, honestly. It's mostly just, it's your wheel bearing grease is what it is. I mean, your food grade grease is really cheap too on Amazon. There's nothing special about it. So you don't need to spend a whole bunch of money buying the stuff to make these work. And yeah, this is where you're gonna, this is the fun part. Trying to get that little bugger lined up in there. And sometimes you get lucky. And sometimes you don't. So we'll get that lined up. There she goes. And that's it. Rest of it, just button it up. Put your clip back in, cover it up with that, put your cylinder head back on. I like to run it for 30 seconds to a minute after it's completely done, just to let everything get lubricated and good to go. And then test run it, make sure everything's working good. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I mean, I don't imagine this video is very long, and I didn't edit it out, so you've pretty much seen the whole deal except for the basic getting it down to where we got to do it. So I would figure you're going to spend 15 minutes maybe doing one of these. Once you do it a couple times, you're going to get faster and faster at it. So that is how you get that in there. And the other thing, real quick, flip the compressors over. This is the same thing on the cs3 models, even though they're in a bigger case. You take this off. Underneath here is a spring and a little check valve. The spring's not going to come flying out at you. It's just going to sit in there inside the check valve. Take that out. Pull those out with a, I just use one of these, try to grab the bottom of the spring and pull it out. Clean it all up, use a Q-tip or something, clean all the crap out of there, put it back together. There's a rubber O-ring on this, so it's going to seal back up. Again, these are pretty solid units. So that, replacing that, this compressor will be good to go. So, all right, thank you.